We are going live. Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Dr. Kausar Ahmed, and I'm from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I welcome you all this morning to a joint Conflict and Resilience Research Institute and Institute of Applied Anthropology organized webinar. And this webinar is particularly important for various reasons, because we have invited guests, those who have wide experiences in the field of education. And the thematic title of our today's webinar is Effect of Pandemic on Tertiary Education and Nation's Responses. So just to give a brief idea about the Institute of Applied Anthropology, it's based out of Bangladesh, Dhaka, and it conducts both explanatory and action research. It engages in advocacy against all forms of discrimination in the society, especially for the underprivileged and disadvantaged section of the population. It offers need-based training program for the development partners on action research. It organizes consultation meetings, seminars, symposiums, conferences, and it also implements people-centric impact and evaluation research. So we have partnered with the Institute of Applied Anthropology for this webinar. In today's webinar, we have decided to stagger the discussion in two parts. So now we are joined by two eminent scholars from USA and from Winnipeg, and I'll have a very brief their bios, because I would be requesting them to kind of introduce themselves in turn. And in the first session this morning, we have Professor Dr. Bob Hopkins from Business Studies, University of Texas, Arlington, and he's a philanthropist, and he published, and he has quite a bit of very impressive activities in terms of philanthropy. And if I may read a couple of things from his bio, Bob brings together the not-for-profit industry with the not-for-profit sector, social entrepreneurship. He serves or has served over 100 not-profits and NGOs, non-government organizations, helping their mission, vision, and strategic planning processes. Bob also created the PAVE program, Philanthropy and Volunteerism in Entrepreneurship, which teaches children ages 7 to 12 how to serve community and become a volunteer. He also wrote a book on entrepreneurship and philanthropy, and I would, here it is, he is very proud. Philanthropy misunderstood, yeah, often it is. And I will leave rest of the things to be discussed and shared by Dr. Bob. Our second speaker today has a very wide experience in education and conflict resolution himself, Dr. Izzeddin Hawamda. He is currently a PhD candidate in Peace and Conflict in University of Manitoba, Arthur B. Morrow Center for Peace and Justice. And also he teaches in Menno Simons and an educator in Seven Oaks School Division. So here are our two speakers today, and they're going to talk on the thematic areas. So the way we conduct webinar here is we expect these speakers to speak freely, flexibly from 15 to 20 minutes, and then we invite questions from the audience, those who are tuning in. So the order of presentations or discussion would be, first I would invite Dr. Bob Hopkins to speak and share his ideas about this one, and followed by Izzeddin Hawamda. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome today's two speakers. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. I'm Bob Hopkins from Texas in the United States, from Dallas, Texas, but currently I'm in Arizona, which is way out west. And they told me I couldn't fly to the conference that I'm attending today and tomorrow and Sunday. So I had to drive 2 days because the coronavirus, they didn't want anybody flying on airplanes to get to this conference. So we're taking all kinds of precautions in the United States to try to stay safe. And, you know, it's so difficult just talking to Izzy here not too long ago, and he said he's used to this and being in quarantine for much of his life because he's from Palestine. And in Texas, we just are able to kind of roam around and do what we want to when we want to do it. So to now tell us that we have to be locked down is a shock. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And I've never stayed at home so long in my life. My family doesn't know why I'm at home because I'm doing all my work at home. I'm teaching classes online now. I don't go out to restaurants. We cook, we get our food delivered, or we go to the grocery store, and we don't go in the grocery store. They put it in our trunk. And so I don't even get to see what's on the shelves anymore. I just say, I want a can of tomato soup, and they put a can of tomato soup. I don't get to check and look and see what kind of brands they have, what's on sale today, or anything like that. And usually when they put in my food, I get home and half of it's missing because they're out of those kinds of things at the grocery store. And they make a substitute. So if I didn't want tomato soup, they just decided then they'd put in tomato minestrone soup or something like that. So anyway, life is different for me and for us in the United States because of this virus. And so I don't know exactly what you want me to talk about with this. Dr. Kauser, could you kind of help me make a decision here about which way you want me to talk?
Absolutely, Dr. Bob. We are particularly interested about the impact of pandemic on students, and especially students, those who are going to higher studies, educational institutions. So how this pandemic has caused different ways of teaching, and you are a lifelong educator. How do you see this whole things unfolding, and what is the long-term impact of such kind of mode of teaching in a long distance webinar sort of thing? That would be our primary question today.
Okay. Well, it's a very confusing question as well, because we're just trying to figure out ourselves what to do. March, the end of March, we went on vacation for spring break, and we came back, but we were told not to come back because we would now be doing everything online. And those of us who don't like online teaching, which I have never liked it because I never get to see my students. I never get to see their responses. I can't see their facial features. And I teach communications. So it's very difficult for me to see and to talk to students that I can't see and I can only hear me. So we fortunately have Zoom, and we have things like this. And so I am now teaching with Zoom, but I'm teaching a class starting next week, and the student says, "What do you mean we meet? I thought this was an online class." And I said, "It is online, but we get to see each other face to face." And she said, "I didn't plan that. That's not what I signed up for." And I said, "I know, welcome to the new world." And that's the challenge that we all have as adults. And I am not thinking, I guess, too much about my students' problems because I think they're young and they're going to be very adaptable, but that's not the case. We have students who go to work, and they work from 8 to 5, and some of them work from 5 to 12, and some of them work from 12 to 6 in the morning. And how can we, as administrators and educators, figure out when is the best time for students to come? So I'm trying to be as flexible as possible as a teacher. And I think that's the word that we have to, around the world, have to talk about is flexibility. Today's conference, for instance, we're having to be flexible because of time zones. I mean, it's 9 hours difference it's 12 hours difference between Dallas and Bangladesh. And I'm in Arizona, which is 2 hours earlier than that. So it's actually 14 hours difference between Bangladesh and here. And now we're trying to get together. And here we've got Izzy, and he's in Montreal. And so that's just a couple of hours away. But if he was in Palestine, I guess that would be, I don't know how many, 6 or 7 hours away. And I've got friends who are, I think, on the webinar from Algeria. And Algeria is 6 hours away. So how are we going to do that? And I teach online, and I ask international students to participate and sign up at our college, and they can do that, but then they've got to figure out what time it is that we're going to actually be online. So here's what I've done, and I don't know what other teachers will want to do. I'm doing more than what I signed up to do. I'm actually teaching 2 hours in the morning, and that same class, 2 hours at night. so that those people who go to work can actually see me and be part of this, because it is so important that I actually am the teacher and that they can see me and that they don't have to just read what I want them to learn about how to speak. And I teach communication, so they have to give speeches. In the old days, when you were online, what you used to do is to upload your speeches to YouTube. And that's difficult. So what you have to do, students had to do, was they had to find a group of people in an airport, or they had to gather their family members, and they had to speak in front of their family members, or speak at the people in front of at the airport. And then they had to upload their speeches and then send them to me, and then I have to download them, and then I have to watch it, and then I have to grade them. Very difficult in speech and communications to be teaching online, but we've got to figure it out. So anyway, we went to Zoom. And this is not an advertisement for Zoom, because our college says Zoom is not secure anymore. There's lots of people who are hacking Zoom. They're coming into the middle of classes. They're saying obscenities, and it's upsetting people. So they said, no more Zoom. So they've given me another couple of choices. And the other couple of choices I'm going to try next week on my new students. It's called Compatible Ultra. No, it's called Collaborative Ultra. And so it's something that's part of Blackboard. And these are systems around the world that some countries have and some countries don't have. And the United States, they're inventing new ways every day. So again, in flexibility, what is available for us to properly teach students, from whether they're in Dallas or whether they're in Palestine or whether they're in another place. So anyway, those are our challenges, and that's my challenge. And I have students who are in the middle, and they can't figure out exactly what to do, and they don't know me yet. And so next week, they're going to be hearing me explain what we're going to be talking about and how we're going to do it. Because some of them don't read Blackboard, which means they don't read what I have actually told them to do. So if you have some feedback about this topic, I would certainly like to hear it, and then maybe I could make some more comments. And it seems like Professor Halim has just come in. Hello, Professor Halim.
Okay.
She can maybe or not. Okay, hello. Is this Sadeka? Halim?
I cannot hear.
Okay, I can hear you. There you are. Dr. Kauser, we can't hear you.
I cannot hear, actually.
Yeah, can you hear us now, Dr. Sadeka? Good morning. Can you hear us now?
No.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I don't know.
We can hear you. Yeah, you have unmuted the mic. Just unmute the mic. Yeah, now
Yes.
It's all right.
Okay, hello, good evening.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, good evening from Bangladesh.
And sorry, we are just in the midst of Dr. Bob's presentation. Dr. Sadeka Halim, again, welcome from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. And thanks for joining us, I hope with an urgent note from Dr.
Yes,
Mazhar, because
yes, I thought it was scheduled for 9 p.m. Bangladesh time. So I was kind of taking a break from an hour and just finished my webinar with the Education Minister. But nonetheless, I'm at home, so no problem.
Oh, thank you so much. We appreciate. So we'll get back to you, Dr. Bob, and he was talking about the challenges of education during the pandemic and what is his experience.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
You know, another challenge that we have, I was just talking, Dr. Halim, about the difficulty it is for those of us who teach in the classroom, face-to-face, and then all of a sudden we have to teach online. And those of us who have not been trained in teaching online, I don't know, we're getting feedback from somebody. Is that Professor Halim? Is that where we're getting feedback from? Okay, I'll continue. I guess it's me, and I'm not sure what to do about it. Are you all getting the feedback also? And Dr. Kauser, you're mute again.
Yeah, a little bit of echo coming from possibly your, or if Dr. Sadeka, can you kindly mute the microphone? in your software. Let's see if it improves.
That's probably it.
Yeah.
And then another challenge that I see, and in America at least, is that because we are the land of the free and the home of the brave, a lot of our students, especially our students, don't believe that we have a pandemic in the world, apparently, because they are, as soon as it says, okay, you can now go to the grocery store, they all go to the beach or they go to the movie house and they gather around, and we have pictures of them just play like nothing's going on in the world. And they say, now, the stay-at-home lockdown is no longer here, but we can gradually go back to real life. Students are going to get sick. And so students don't understand authority, and they don't understand that when you say wear a mask, you've got to wear a mask. And I don't know what's going to happen and how that's going to affect everything. But, Taiwan has 4 or 5 cases, I think, and it's because everybody's following the rules. The United States has 100,000 deaths as of yesterday. So we are in a challenge time for students and a challenge time for teachers and everybody to figure this all out and try to arrive home at night alive. So that's a challenge that I've got.
Dr. Bob, we would be also interested to know, what do you see the long-term impacts of pandemic on the education system in the US? Because we are trying to explore how the nations are responding in order to helping the young, what we call the future generation to navigate through this pandemic. And how do you see the challenges coming in for the future?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't think that probably in the next couple of years, we're going to really be able to gather together like we did before. And the educational system is not funded to have over 10 students in a classroom today, when a classroom is only 30 feet by 50 feet. And we used to have 40 students involved in that classroom, and now we can only have 10. So the colleges are saying we do not have the room in order to accommodate everybody. So they're now telling us that we're probably going to have to go 7 days a week and 24 hours a day in different shifts throughout the summer and throughout the year, which means there will be no holidays that are the same for everybody. So we may have some students who are going to have their vacation in January, and some will have theirs in July, as usual. So that's what's going to happen in education, partially. Number 2 is, of course, we're going to be teaching more online. And I think some of us teachers who love staying home and not having to put any pants on, and all you do is see here and all you know is that I have a shirt on, I think we're going to enjoy that. We're going to say, you know what, I really like teaching from home because I don't have to get in my car and I don't have to drive anywhere, and I'm just fine doing this. But then you find out that half of your students don't even have a computer, because we have a third of our countries in poverty. Don't know if you know that about America. A third of our countries in poverty. We have a third of our students going to bed hungry every night, and you think that we're the land of the free, but we're also prosperous. Isn't necessarily the situation in the circumstances. For those of you who have been to the United States and actually found out that we have poor neighborhoods who not only don't have a car, they don't have a computer. Oh, they've got a TV, but they don't have a computer. So we have a lot of kids who are not going to be able to be part of this deal unless we find funding and put it into education. And, in this country, we're not necessarily the best in education in the world. You would think that we should be and could be because we're so dynamic people, but we're not. So that's what I'm finding is going to be difficult. So you asked me how long this is going to last. It could be the rest of my life. I only have 18 more years to live. That's what I've determined. And so I'm not sure how long I'm going to be a teacher, but I hope that it's all of those 18 years. And I can't imagine a time that we're going to be able to gather again like we did last December, because they tell me this thing's going to go on and on and on and on. Am I right?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I mean, except the part of your lifespan, we have loved the rest of the statements. So, Bob, before I actually leave you, my last question to you today is, what we see actually the challenges of delivering education, that is fairly understood, and it's possibly going to be a little long term in the future. But what do you see in terms of employment of these young people coming out of the educational institutions in the future as well? Because our employment sectors have, at least in Canada, I have seen it's radically changing, and less of employment in terms of blue collar jobs and retail businesses, not-for-profit sectors. I don't. So, can you give us some idea what is happening in the U.S. In terms of young people's employment?
Okay, I just heard a man speak just recently. He's a bishop of the Catholic Church. His name is Dr. Kevin Williams from South Carolina, and he has a whole nother take on this whole thing. He thinks that this is a wonderful experience for us, that we're going to clean ourselves up, that we're going to reinvent ourselves. And the people who end up on the other side, which is the positive side at the end of all this, are those people who are able to reinvent themselves. And it's up to each of us to determine if we're going to end up on the other side in a positive way or negative. So I think this is a challenge for our young people to think out of the box. And this is not the norm anymore, how we used to wake up and how we used to go to bed and what we did in between time. And just because you think you're going to be an anthropologist, it may be an anthropologist not working in the field anymore. It may be an anthropologist working from home or in a corporation, or it may be some of us get together and buy some of these islands that are all over the world for sale for $1 million or $500,000 and some for 10,000 and create our own little countries and create our own little states. And who knows, we just put some more men on the moon this week in the United States. And maybe that's what we're going to be focused on is changing that. We are so short in engineers in the United States that anybody who wants a job, all they need to do is go into data systems, and they'll have a job anywhere in the world. We need 150,000 engineers in the United States right now. And so people from the foreign countries wanting to get to the United States for a job, they have them. What's going to happen is the people in restaurants. People aren't going to go to restaurants like they used to go to restaurants. Our restaurants are closing. Our big department stores are closing. And according to Dr. Williams, who I just mentioned, Kevin, he says that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we don't have as much competition in some of those other areas, and that we're going to be okay at the end of the day. So what am I going to tell my students about what is their future going to be? I'm going to have to talk to them about out of the box thinking, critical thinking about what was and what is going to be, because it's going to be up to them. They're the millennials. It's going to be up to them to make the decisions about how we're going to end up on the other side, in my opinion.
Dr. Kasha, I want to ask Bob one question, that since you have a shortage of engineer to run in the government, how come Donald Trump has signed a bill to dig the moon? I mean, have you heard about that? That he just signed a bill that the U.S. is going to dig the moon?
Yeah. You know what? Donald Trump's a crazy man. We are going to have only 4 more months of him, or 5. And then he's going to be gone. And I think Donald Trump and all the things that he has changed and has created will somehow not be. So I don't like to think about the future with Donald Trump. I'd like to think about the future with some people who are going to be able to bring our country out of this and move forward and move on. So I don't know what's going to happen. He's going to in the next 5 months, and I don't really even want to talk about him.
Thank you, Bob. I have just around 3 minutes to complete your part of the participation. My last question about your niche, expertise, philanthropy and entrepreneurship. So, do you see changes in this sector as well? Because maybe, as you have mentioned, that we won't have to go to the places to do philanthropy or to run projects in the future. So what do you see changes in terms of application of our philanthropic activities?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that question. I'm happy to end up on this question because this is my life. Hope is philanthropy. And that's what I want to instill in children is hope. I'm working with Masarul in Bangladesh, possibly on a course that we're going to be able to work together on in helping people think about hope and solutions. And that's what philanthropy is. And I think that is going to be one of the ways out of all of this, is by everybody buckling down and figuring out what is it I can do as a person to change in a positive way the life of somebody else, or my own hometown, or my own park, or my own orphanage, or whatever. So I think that philanthropy, this word, which is a magic one, is the word that we're all going to be talking about more and more, about love of mankind, taking care of each other. And I see it happening. I see the millennials understanding what philanthropy is and everybody wanting to do something to help neighbors. So I think that that is going to be something that I'm going to be working on in Bangladesh with Masarul and I, if we get this thing going. And hopefully every student in the United States and every student in Bangladesh are going to be able to, when they're in second and third and fourth grade, they're going to know it's better to give than to receive. They're going to need to know that it's better to help your neighbor than not. They're going to need to know that if you're bored and you want something to do, go out and help somebody else, and it'll give you the self-esteem that you have been lacking. So I love what I do. And I love what I do because my students seem to get it with some time. And I get to have them for a whole semester, or 8 weeks, or 16 weeks. And over that period of time, they go, wow, I needed this, because it gives me the self-esteem that I've been looking for. It gives me some purpose. And I think that's one of the things we lack, is purpose.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for enlightening us about philanthropy. Before we move to the second speaker today, let's welcome our co-host, Dr. A.K. Mazharul Islam, a professor in Sharjah University of Science and Technology, and an adjunct with the James P. Grant Brack School. So, Dr. Mazhar, thank you very much for joining. So we'll listen to our second speaker today, Izzeddin Hawamda. I have not gone into his detailed bio, but I would like to request Izzeddin Hawamda to speak a little bit about his lifetime experience, and then he can talk about his today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kausar. Can you hear me,
for
everyone?
having me.
Okay, good morning. Thanks, Bob. That was a very interesting look at the field that you come from. Thank you so much, and welcome to your guests from Bangladesh. So I want to be mindful of their time as well. So good evening to you as well. My name is Izzeddin Hawamda. I'm originally from Palestine, so the West Bank of Palestine, but now live and have been a Canadian citizen for quite some time. I come into the field of education from two doors, and they're very interesting doors. One door I came to as a refugee, as someone who came to Canada and learned English as a second or a third language, and the other door is now as an educator. So today I am offering the two sides of this, the two sides of the coin, to give people an understanding of how newcomers, refugee students, EAL students, are dealing and are coping with COVID-19 and with all the stresses that COVID-19 has brought. I'd like to start with acknowledging that COVID-19 has changed lives and the world in so many ways. And also, of course, education being a place where people interact, meet, classrooms where people are sitting together and learning. The pandemic that we're dealing with today have changed all of that. I am also someone who's working on my PhD, as Kausar briefly touched upon. I'm working on writing about the Jewish-Arab dialogue here in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, and the process of that, and where is that dialogue is at, and what could we do to ignite the dialogue between these two communities, and how we can engage young people in this dialogue. as I believe dialogue is super important, and that I connect to the idea of dialogue in so many ways, because I do come from a community that is communal. Oral traditions are very important, and speaking to your neighbors and to community is the basis for a lot of the things that we do culturally, spiritually, and so on and so on. So today's presentation, I'm going to break it down into three categories when it comes to newcomers and EAL students, and how the pandemic has changed a lot of their interactions and added new stresses to their lives. The first category I want to focus is mental health. The second category is finances, and the third is community. The mental health piece here is very important to understand for many reasons. When I talk to students and daily, and we interact through Zoom and other platforms, a lot of the students mention how being at home has changed a lot of things and the nature of their daily lives. When you have a house of 8 or 9 people, the stresses that are now added onto their lives, they are tremendous. Anxiety, depression are things that students are dealing with on a daily basis now. More of it increasing, of course, because of a lot of things, mainly that now you're stuck at home and you can't do much. Now, for teenagers, being at home, not being able to get out, not being able to see their friends, not joining their sport teams or activities, that has added so much stresses and pressures onto their lives. The second point here when it comes to mental health, depending on what community you come from, and I'll speak about mine, my community, unfortunately, does not talk much about mental health. And it is always, this topic is a taboo topic, because a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that if you're dealing with mental health, you're marginalized, that you are sometimes shut out and you are pushed out of the community, and there is a very bad light that is put on you because of these issues. So a lot of our students who are dealing with anxiety, with depression, do not talk about this because of the fear of those things. So as educators during this time of COVID-19, it is very important to acknowledge and to be trained to work with students and help students deal with their mental health issues. And when it comes to newcomer students specifically, it is important to have culturally specific mental health care education and multilingual mental health services that are representative, that are inclusive, that are accessible, and they're of course available for our students and their families. For me, when it comes to this piece, as a Palestinian and someone who had lived in Palestine, mental health during the pandemic of COVID-19 has risen for me and my family, and of course my community, because we come from a system where curfews were a normal thing. Curfews were part of our daily life. So when you come to Canada now and you're seeing the high toll numbers of deaths on TV, when you hear government officials talking about enacting certain curfew measures and so on and so on, a lot of our students and a lot of family members that I know are feeling a lot of pressure, and a lot of trauma has been coming back from what they have known in the past. So it is important to acknowledge those aspects of daily lives for our students, and being able to help them get through this re-traumatizing period for them and their families. So it is important to educate youth and their families about mental health issues, and to provide skills and strategies for addressing these issues, and connect families with services that are culturally responsive and multilingual. And this has sometimes been a very hard thing to do here in Manitoba because of the lack of services, the culturally representative services that are available for us as educators and students. The one thing that I've been trying to do to help students navigate through some of those issues is to try to keep a dialogue open about mental health. And as hard as it is to have these conversations with some students and their families, because the first reaction sometimes what I get is the denial. My son or my daughter are okay. They don't have these issues. They're just under stress. but that's not the same story that I get from the students themselves. So having this understanding of the culture and also the nature of these dialogues, it can help me as an educator to bridge the gap between the students' issues and the student concerns and the concerns of their family, and try to mediate and help find them the proper support that they are in need of. The second aspect of being a teacher now and teaching during this pandemic also is the high stress among newcomer students when it comes to learning language. And this also has been adding to the stresses of on their mental health, physical health, and other areas. A lot of the questions I get is, Mr. Hawamda, am I going to graduate this year? I haven't been able to practice my English since I've been home because my family doesn't speak English at home. So what could we do to help students continue to learn and educate them and give them things to do while they're home and not being at school? The first few weeks and the first few months, as everybody was talking about earlier, had been very hard in terms of adjusting to the new online world and on the online teaching aspect of things. We were trying to find the best platform to use. We've gone from Zoom to other things and Google Classrooms, and now finally we're starting to find a rhythm that that has been working a little bit for most students, and trying to establish a quote unquote a normal way of dealing with students and helping them navigate through their schoolwork and so on and so on. Secondly, the second part I want to focus on is the finance or the financial aspect of life under the quarantine or under COVID-19 for many families. Newcomer families and refugees, this has been a very hard time. So many families were struggling financially before the pandemic, being newcomer to Canada, not having language skills, and sometimes being trying to get back into the work you were doing. Sometimes new families and they don't have the capacities or the requirements required by the Canadian market, the work market, to be able to get jobs in Winnipeg or in Canada. So a lot of the families were on social assistance or trying to get on social assistance. So the times were hard for them before the pandemic. Now, because of the pandemic and because of COVID-19, a lot of the places that potentially newcomer families were hoping to work in or trying to get jobs in are now shut off or closed or postponed, or the nature of the pandemic that we're dealing with. So the employment for many families are not available. So this had added extra stresses on the families and, of course, naturally on the students themselves. So many students have been put in a position now to support their families, and this is very true of many students I have, where now they're in grade 11s and 12s, but now have to go get jobs, during the night hours or during the evenings to try to help their families and their extended families. And that's a very important point here, because sometimes we forget that just because you're in Winnipeg or you're in Manitoba, you still need to help your family back home. You have an extended family of 10, sometimes 15 people who have been depending on you for years now. So you still have to make end meets for them as well and to support them. So when you are trying to get students to hand in their assignments, trying to do exams or tests or meet you online, and they are working or they have been working overnight, as a teacher, as an educator, you want to be mindful of that. Many students, of course, talk to us about not being able to find jobs and how that is also stressful for them, and have put them in a position where they are seeing their families struggle, they're seeing their families in need, but they don't know how to help them. So they ask questions about what can I do to help my family? So sometimes school or getting work done is not their priority, as we can understand. So being able to support them, being able to help them create what they need, for example, resumes, cover letters, being able to give them some skills, help them find places to apply for. Those are important things that educators have been trying to do. Other students are required to take care of younger siblings as well, as parents have to take on extra work. Sometimes we have students saying, well, I can't do your work. I haven't been able to do the work you assigned because now I am home trying to take care of my younger brother or sister, or taking care of my older grandparents, for example, as well. So we want to be also able to help students through this tough time as well. So as educators, we must remain mindful of the lives and experiences of students outside of the classroom and their schoolwork. The school division I work in, Seven Oaks Division, has been delivering food and necessities to families in need throughout the suspension of classes. Our school division had been able to come up with a list, or try to come up with a list of students who are in need, and we have been trying to support them by bringing them food hampers, by trying to connect with them and providing them with Chromebooks. And there was an initiative not long ago to try to get students internet access if they don't have internet access. So our school division is trying many ways to make education or online learning as accessible and as equitable as possible for as many students as possible. And just like Dr. Bob mentioned earlier, we are still trying to figure out the best way to learn online. This has been what, 4 or 5 months? So we're still trying to learn from our previous mistakes and try to adapt and try to redirect our efforts to what works, and to try to learn from all of those things that we have been doing. The last piece I want to focus on is the community aspect. And I mentioned earlier, as a Palestinian, as someone who just finished observing Ramadan, and someone who just celebrated Eid, community is the source of our energy, the source of our understanding of life. The teachings that we have as people comes from the community. So and our identities are, in so many ways, are constructed through the teachings of our elders and our community. So to be away from community and to be isolated from your community, that's a direct challenge to who you are as a person, and a direct challenge to you as a student, and as families. So just recently, when we were fasting, a lot of students would talk to us about how they are under a lot of stresses and a lot of pressure because they have not been able to break fast as they used to with their families and friends, and so on and so on. So you want to be able to understand the cultures and the importance of community for our newcomer students and refugee students as well. So there was lots of feelings of loneliness as a challenge that many students and families have been dealing with during this time of isolation and quarantine. And so as teachers who work with newcomer students, this has been particularly evident among students from collective cultures. There has been a sense of a loss, like a loss associated with the missed community events. The Eid parties that took place a few days ago were very strange, if I could use the word, very unnormal, where you didn't get together. You did a drive-through and you waved at each other out of a car window. So a lot of families are not used to that. A lot of families didn't have the opportunity to eat together, to celebrate together, to shake hands. That's a very important aspect of the community as well. And you could see that because we are conditioned to get together. As soon as you see people from your community, you want to get together. You want to share happy moments with your community. So the pandemic has changed a lot of that. So our students are showing that. Our students are saying we have not been out, or we have not been able to get together with our friends and community. So at the beginning of this pandemic and the restraints and the suspensions, a lot of the students were dealing with anxiety, and they just couldn't focus. So the idea of focusing on your work and trying to do your work or your schoolwork was very hard for a lot of students. Also, it has been important to continue to connect with students as teachers as much as possible. So as an EAL teacher, we hold a Zoom meeting or an online meeting every once or twice a week. And the idea is to invite students to just log in and talk And it doesn't sometimes we don't do schoolwork, sometimes we don't focus on the academic aspect, but we try to open the dialogue about how are you doing, what is going on at home, how is your family doing with this, to try to establish a network of support, to try to establish a system in which students can tap into to try to find help if they need to. So many times during these meetings, we focused on providing students with a list of mental health services that are available in Winnipeg, a list of food bank services that are available for them and their families, a list of classes online if they need access to English classes and grammar classes and so on and so on, to help them improve their English skills. And of course, part of these meetings also to help them connect with their regular teachers, other teachers that are teaching them, and help them navigate through their school work and try to help them get their work done on time and hand in work in when they're supposed to. The one thing here that students told us about and struggle with is the language piece. So when you are in a classroom and the teacher is lecturing or helping you or teaching you, if you don't understand, it is much easier for newcomer students to ask or to seek help after class, or to go to a homework club, or come to me as an EL teacher and bring in their work. But now that you are having 4 or 5 classes online, and each class requires you to put in about 45 minutes to an hour to do your work and to understand the material, that's a lot of pressure on someone who's still learning and developing a language. So trying to navigate through the online learning for many newcomer students and their families who are also doing online English classes at night as adults, have put in a lot of pressure on them and on their families. So I don't just teach students. I have many times tried, while I'm teaching the students or connecting with my students, their parents come online and ask for help as well. Ask for help to read their, the letters they gotten from the government, or maybe how to apply for certain programs. So we're trying to be mindful, and I remind my colleagues all the time, just because you put instructions on your website or you ask students to do certain things, this doesn't necessarily mean that newcomers understand the assignment in terms of language. And sometimes the cultural implications of your assignments also are things that newcomer students they cannot adapt to, they don't understand it. So that's why it is important to have spaces and times where newcomer students and teachers can connect and understand these assignments one-on-one if they need that. So we're trying to bridge that gap in any way and shape we can. So conferencing applications and education softwares have been used in variety of ways to help students and teachers connect. Students also have not only been able to see each other and speak to each other, they have been able to share their successes and concerns with continuing to engage with their learning. The one thing that was surprising to me is that many of students who didn't do work in classrooms now are doing work and handing work online, because they're at home and their families are asking them, this is what you need to do. You need to hand in your work. So I have been in contact with their families, and I have been helping them to get their work done. So one of the positive things about online learning, that some of the students that wouldn't come for help or wouldn't ask for help in a traditional classroom are now asking for help, and we're scheduling Zoom meetings, and we're trying to help them as we go. Also, it has been important to me to emphasize to families, and this is a very important piece for me as an educator, but also as a Palestinian, someone who promotes agency, someone who promotes community, someone who is always asking students and inviting students to share their narratives and their stories, that families are the first teachers. Families that are the first and the most important learning source for their students. So I ask families to use this time in quarantine, and that you have your students at home, to teach them about your culture, about your language, about your roots, and to try to teach them about who they are. Engage in conversations about where you come from. So the idea of where you come from and how do we work with multiple identities have been a topic of discussion here on online platforms with my students and I, because they're asking me questions about I've talked to my grandparents about where they came from, and they told me these stories. It's interesting, and they share these stories with us as educators. So I'm telling families, use this time to build these bridges. Use this time to continue to learn and teach your kids, and to try to enhance their learning in any way possible. So the knowledge that has been shared and has been taught to students from their families are very important. So it is important to, as a community, to engage and be part of your of your sons and daughters' learning journeys, and to also give yourself credits, to also believe that your education and the sources that you have in your disposal are very important and are very valuable for your student and for your community. The last point here that we want to talk about is racism and discrimination, because we've seen evidence of it here in the city, and it has been on the rise since the pandemic has started. Racism and discrimination mostly was highlighted and faced by people who came or come from different countries, or maybe who have traveled from in and out of the country recently, mostly from Asia. So racism and discrimination are also important for educators to address with students as a result of the pandemic. A rise in fear of others has led to reports of acts of assaults and violence against newcomers here. And so it's important to have these conversations and to engage students to talk about their experiences, and to talk about what they've heard or what they've seen on during the time when they're away. What is their family talking about? What are there certain things that their communities are dealing with? And once you have these stories, you can open it up to discussions. You can try to learn from it, and you can help other educators understand that yes, we are all dealing with the pandemic, but we are dealing with it differently. And we are dealing with it from many different angles. Race is a big thing in the pandemic, and racism is also an important topic to address when we're dealing with the pandemic and how it has been affecting newcomers and their families. It is important for educators also to make students aware of the facts and address misconceptions and misinformation that is circulating widely in media and social media. And this is something that we have been talking about through our Zoom meetings. Many students would ask, I've seen this on TV, or I've seen this on Facebook, or I've seen this fact on Twitter. Is it correct? Is it right? And sometimes, because the lack of information, sometimes people or communities are painted with one brush. So it is important to take these facts apart. It is important to open the dialogue. It is important to talk about these misconceptions and where they come from and how to address them. It is important to educate teachers and students about these things and to share what students are talking about. Sometimes our students feel maybe afraid, maybe shy to share some of those facts or these things that they heard about or they think about with their teachers. But because we have this bond with them, because I am their EL teacher, because I can relate to their stories in so many ways, they share these stories with me. So I take these stories with their permission and try to share it with our colleagues to try to spread awareness of what is happening in our communities and how we can all be part of this learning journey. So students are home consuming media without a lot of guidance or critical discussion. And the reason for that is sometimes the language that is used to share this information with the students is a very difficult language for parents to understand. So they don't know how to help their kids navigate through this information, and they don't know how to classify it from being good information or bad information, or wrong information and right information. So it is important to work with all of this to help students understand where the information comes from and how we can use it to help us get through this. So in a nutshell, and I would leave this, we have been working, I'll leave you with this note, I have been working with my students in so many capacities to navigate teaching online through Zoom and other media forums, platforms. It's been hard. I became a teacher because I love interacting with students. I became a teacher because I walked in my classroom and I can see students. Usually I see about 90 students a day. So to have that taken away, to have that challenged, our jobs as teachers are also being different. So I miss being in a classroom. I miss being around my students, but we're trying to make the best out of this time. And I'm always reminding my colleagues and my school and my administrators that the pandemics and COVID-19 had challenged newcomers and their communities in so many ways. So we want to be able to remember this, and we want to be able to reflect on this, and to help students and their families navigate through this and come out of it stronger, hopefully. So the education system is trying to adapt and has tried to adapt, and it's doing a good job in terms of adapting to the new norm of teaching. There's lots of things that we're still trying to learn. There's lots of things that we're still trying to improve on. Technology is one of them, of course. Technology has a mind of its own. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we're also trying to navigate through how can we ask students and invite students to be critical thinkers, responsible thinkers, and to try to engage them in decision making as we move forward. So we are looking forward to going back to school in June. In Manitoba here, we're going back to school in June 1st. On June 1st, teachers will go back to work, and students can be invited into school in small numbers of students to help them, navigate through some of the material. So I'm looking forward for that, because it's nice to see some of my students, and of course to spend time with my colleagues. But in September, we are hoping to go back to a semi-normal teaching life, but as Bob said, we don't know how that's going to look yet. So for now, we're doing all we can, and I just want to say thank you to Kauza for allowing me to speak about this important topic. And if you have any questions, I'll try my best to address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to welcome Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin from Bangladesh. He's a professor at North-South University of Anthropology.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I have to leave. I loved hearing you, Izzy, and thank you. And I'm so sorry I can't hear the rest of you. But I will watch maybe the recording of all of us together.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Yeah. Bye, Bob.
Please do,
I hope
Bob.
to live
Thank you so
long
much
enough so I
for
can touch
joining.
all of you subtype by shaking your hands.
All right. All right. See you then, Bob.
We'll
all
do.
Right. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you. So now let's welcome and introduce our next speaker. She's an eminent scholar from Bangladesh, and she's Dr. Sadeka Halim, and she's the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences and Professor of Sociology at the University of Dhaka, and the largest publicly funded university in Bangladesh. And she's also, she was a former Information Commissioner of Bangladesh. She comes with a wealth of information, and we'll be eagerly waiting to hear from her and her perspective on the pandemic's impact on tertiary education. And without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Sadeka Halim. Your microphone. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kasser, for inviting me into this session where I had the opportunity to listen to two kind of comments from two distinguished professors, one from the US and another from Canada. And I actually graduated from McGill University. I did my master's and PhD from McGill, Canada. So I'm quite familiar with Canadian perspective, and I have my colleague here, Professor Helal Mouhiuddin, who actually lived in Manitoba for quite some time and did his studies and research. And of course, today actually we had a very good webinar session organized by the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Dhaka, in collaboration with UK8 and also International Foundation for Electoral Systems based in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and their head office is actually in Washington. And it was very good because it was very participatory, and our distinguished honorable Education Minister, Dr. Dipu Mani, she was there present, and as well our Pro-Vice Chancellor Academic, she was as well present. Actually, we are more or less going through the same problem because Bangladesh is also part of the pandemic, and today we found out that amongst the 25 countries, we are also kind of going up the ladder in terms of the risks we are actually encountering in regard to pandemic and the COVID-19. So our infection is also rising very high. Our death toll is also increasing, but we cannot stop our life, as other professors just pointed out constructively. Our students are, their situation differ from what they have mentioned in terms of students being in UK or in North America or in any other developed countries, because I teach in one of the largest public university and one of the largest department, and my faculty is we have 300 teachers and 6,000 students. So my faculty is the size of one of the private university in Bangladesh. We have 53 public universities and 103 private universities, and we have almost 600,000 students in the public universities, and half of them are I think around 300,000 students. Less than that is in the private sector. But I'm mostly concerned with the students in the public university because I graduated from public university. My father was as well a professor, and he also taught in public university. So I'm a very, very public person. At the same time, I'm very pro-student teacher. And my students, they come from diverse background. Mr. Kausar, you're very familiar with the Bangladesh situation, and because they are not, they do not all come from well-to-do families. So when we did the survey in terms of how we can run online classes, 60% of students, particularly from my faculty of social sciences, they said that okay, we can attend the the online classes, but for the 40%, they have some limitations, and the limitations is mostly that this is quite a poverty-stricken country, and our poverty rate is around 12%, but the economics working in Bangladesh, they have pointed out that the poverty rate is going to increase. It's going to go almost to 30 or above 30. So number of students belong to that group, that category. And so their situation is not that great. And many members, even in some families, getting affected by COVID-19. And their psychological state of mind is not stable. And in the public universities, even in some private universities, our students, they tutor school-going students, college-going students, because their parents are not in a position to bear their expenses in the dormitories, their food expenses, their book expenses, and other expenses, medical care. And so that is totally stopped, because after the lockdown, even though we are having some kind of form of very liberal lockdown, but the students were sent home because we closed all the dormitories in the public universities as well. Private universities, they do not have dormitories. They live in messes, like in houses. Like in North America, I lived in a house I shared my the house with my other graduate students and friends. So that kind of accommodation system also prevails, but mostly students in public universities, they come from the rural areas, like the sub-districts and the villages. And so their internet speed is not that high, and it gets disrupted. And also they do not have enough economic assistance to, go for 3GB, also use 3GB. Also, they do not have access to smartphone or Android phones or laptops. So what to do? But our education minister, she rightly pointed out that we just cannot pass this time. Like we owe it to our next generation of students. So we are, thinking of launching online. We have done some pilot, teaching, and it is sometimes we have seen that yes, the large number of students comes around 50%, more than 50% at times, but it's depending whether they could get the interconnection and other things. So this is one important issue. Another issue is that Dhaka University has almost 10 faculties. So we have science faculties, we have biological science, we have engineering, we have pharmacies, we have art science. But in the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, they do not require lab access, or they do not require students to go and do experiments. Like, for example, if the student is studying, chemistry, she or he has to have access to the lab. So what happens to them? So we had several meetings with the Vice Chancellor of the university, and those deans, they actually pointed out that theoretical part is fine, we can teach online, but in terms of the lab experience and other things, we have to wait till the situation becomes normal. But we have no idea when the situation is going to become normal. But what the education minister rightly pointed out, that we have to look into the other countries, take the best examples and see how they are managing, this kind of problems, particularly the students coming from the science background, how they're going to manage the online, education. And but we have to deal with this disruption. And we just stopped the students in the middle of a semester. Actually, in 18th March 2020, we started our. I'm not going to say it's a vacation, but the lockdown. So all the halls were vacated. But so what to do? So we cannot make them sit. Meanwhile, I must say this, that the students are not sitting actually idle. My students, they have gone home, and Majhar, he also teaches in SAST. He would bail me out too here, that students have gone home, they are mobilizing, they are using their social capital, they are getting in touch with the teachers, their other friends, or the political personalities, public figures, civil society. They are, they are doing a lot of charity work. They are helping the poorest of the poor, the women and the children and the elderly people. Even, that in the beginning people were not listening. Even now people are not listening. As the previous professor rightly pointed out, that the people are going to the beaches in Florida, they are going to the parks in New York, but I have not seen people going out that much in Canada. I was in Canada, so I know people are more disciplined in Canada, I must say, than in USA or Bangladesh or other countries. And I'm sitting in my library, and I can see people through the window walking without masks. So we have not made such a rule yet, but the government should come up with the strict rules that if you do not wear a mask, I'm going to fine you. So sometimes I talk to them from my balcony. I say, hey, you put on the mask. But they said, oh, it's too hot. I feel like throwing up, it's suffocating. So all this situation you have to take into consideration, and then you have to bring back the students into the university. It's impossible, because this is a dormitory-based university, like we have hostels. And 20,000 students actually are staying in different dormitories in the University of Dhaka, and the rest stay outside. But you cannot bring them back because it's heavily congested. And Bangladesh is also a very densely populated country, and the public universities are at the same time very densely populated. I teach a class of 200 students. So in the small room, how am I going to teach them? Either they're going to get contaminated, the teachers are going to get contaminated. We have 60 plus teachers. Yes, they have already started calling me and saying, look, I'm not going to teach directly because I have comorbidity. I'm going to die of COVID-19. So keeping all these things in mind, of course, we would like to go for a change, and we are debating all this paradigmatic shift between from offline to online. Like the public perception in Bangladesh is that online degree is not acceptable, or online publication is not yet that acceptable, because we are so deeply ingrained in our system, the offline thing, the traditional way of face-to-face teaching in the classroom, writing on the boards, and not through the PowerPoint presentation, but teachers usually give lectures. So now these teachers we have to give them training to teach online. So that's one of the challenge for us, and we have to go take the challenges. And some teachers are not, with all due respect, I'm saying that some teachers are not that much used to with the technologically, they are not that well versed. So we have challenge there too. But the students are quite well versed, because they're better than us in terms of technology. And Bangladesh government, they have done wonderful jobs in terms of digitalization. And so we have to reap the benefits of that particular digitalization. And the education minister, she promised us, she gave her commitment that she's gonna talk to the ministry, like the ICT ministry and BTRC and others, to accommodate the students, those who do not have a high-speed internet, or the teachers. So we have to chalk out some policies. And at the same time, of course, the logistic things we need to look into. So these are actually the most challenging things. And particularly another issue that I would like to raise is in terms of women's education. Bangladesh is doing tremendously good in terms of women's involvement in higher education too, though the percentage is quite low. It is 36%. But if you look into the percentage in in the MBBS, those who are studying the medicine and the law, it is 54%, and more than their male counterparts. So the fear that we have, because I also work as gender resource person, gender specialist, and this is one of my niche area, and the women are encountering different forms of violence. And today, one student in our webinar, she said that how we are going to deal with the domestic violence now that women are all, the girl students have gone back, they're all at home. So the patriarchy is everywhere. Maybe the intensity varies in between North American countries, Europe and Bangladesh, India, Nepal, but it does exist. So how do you challenge that patriarchal structures, and when the pandemic is going to hard hit, the economic level is going to go down of those family, what is going to happen to those female students? The parents may choose a boy child over a girl child to send them to for education, because opportunity cost, that question would come, and they're not going to be keen to invest for their girl child's education. So the rate of child marriage already, it's 59%. In the Bangladesh, globally, we stand fourth in terms of child marriage, and domestic violence and other forms of violence, cyberbullying. It's all there. So this is what we need to take into consideration, that the education, to me, whether it is tertiary or for the children, we have to look into it holistically, that it has to be very human and also very inclusive, that we also need to think about the physically challenged students. We need to think about the indigenous communities, the Dalits, the scheduled caste, and we have to think that whether they're going to have access when we go for online courses. So I'm going to stop here. So these are the major challenges today that we have talked about, and I again thank you for giving me the opportunity to share in another broad forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sadeka Halim. It's a very enlightened part of the presentation. And just to refer my affiliation with Dhaka University, I actually received my MPhil degree from Peace and Conflict Department of Dhaka University Social Science in 2010. So that is actually my my launching pad into PhD. So thank you very much, Dr. Sadeka Halim, for such a I would say very diverse set of challenges that you are seeing in Bangladesh, and it's really wonderful today just to see, or the diversity of challenges that education sector is facing in Canada, which we might call it in the western side of this globe, and the east side or the southern side. So before I go into formal question and answer session, we would like to hear from Dr. A.K. Mazharul Islam, who is actually leading Institute of Applied Anthropology, and he is the co-host today. And so let's welcome Dr. A.K. Mazharul Islam, and of course he's in this education sector for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kausif, for having me, and thank you, honorable members of panels. And Bob has just left. He has become a good friend of us by now, and he's doing a couple of things in Bangladesh. So that's nice thing that he was here today. And then Professor Sadeka Halim, who has given you a comprehensive idea about how it is going, what's the Bangladeshi take on this situation. And Izzeddin, it's very nice that you put up that your 6 points thing that you have comprehensively discussed. I will just add a couple of points. That's it. I mean, you have Professor Sadeka Halim has already told about the overall thing that is going on in a Bangladeshi scenario. One of the advantage that Bangladesh higher education has is that we don't have much international student like the US, Canada, and the other Australia, for example. Australia is suffering the most right now because in the new semester there is a very less kind of a enrollment in for the international students for the valid reasons, since we are into this pandemic. So since we are facing a lot of challenges, but we are a little advantageous condition in Bangladesh that we don't have much of that international thing from where the funds are coming internationally, but we are not in that. So that's kind of an advantage that we have, that we are all mostly all local students. We do have some international students in few of the universities, but the number is very less. So that's the education which is a business nowadays, I mean, in many ways. So that's business part of the education scenario is not that affected in Bangladesh. So that's one thing that I really want to mention. And the second is that when we are going to that, I was also listening to the other webinar that led by Professor Sadeka Halim in the afternoon, where education minister and others were really advocating to start the online education right from now, because if we don't start it, if it is kind of a now or never situation. I mean, since it's kind of a, we cannot afford to, it's already 3 months and we cannot afford to spend more time just doing nothing. And so it's time that we start going online. But if you see the whole purpose or the pedagogy of education, it's our online is the solution. It could be a kind of a intermediary solution, but is it a kind of does it go with the actual objective of education, where you need to learn from interaction, and you need to learn from that learner's perspective rather than the teacher's perspective. You need to interact with the peer groups, and you need to make and remake yourself through your knowledge and learning. So that was that whole Paulo Freirean or John Deweyan kind of a pedagogical model that is had been preached over the years to have this tertiary education globally. So we will probably go beyond, or we will lack that educational kind of a stimuli that is the objective of education. Because when you go online, we will miss all those sort of things that Izzeddin was saying, that he loves to go in the classroom and roam around with the students, know their, I mean, their reflexes, how they respond and how they interact, and this is how the learning goes on. So in online, probably will not be able to make it. So my point here is that we need to also make some pedagogical, I mean, innovation here. How we made those. It's not only the question of access. It's also the question of quality. And because the higher education is altogether, it's a question of quality rather than a quantity. I mean, So how we gonna make this quality ensured with those pedagogical adjustment that we need to do for next couple of years at least. So that's a vital question here, that it's not only the question of, I mean, access, but also the question of quality in the classroom through online, using this Zoom or other devices, where those quality or the objective of education will not be compromised, very much. All right, so that's and another thing is, I think the more we go to the 21st century education is more into the skill based education that we are thinking. So it's a major a paradigmatic shift that we are going from a traditional kind of education to that skill based education. So I think there are four things is needed here. Is one is skills, another is talents, another is energy, and another is the knowledge. So with those four things, we need to make some synergy, and it is a real challenge if we can make it in the online classroom. So that's and another point I just want to add is that in Bangladesh, as Professor Sadeka mentioned, that we have 100 plus private universities, and most of the universities are run by the part-time teachers. I mean, they don't have, I mean, they have got very few full-time teachers, and they hire part-time and guest professors from different public universities. So it's time that it's there needs to be take a decision. Those are very underperforming universities, and they can take a decision right now, because it's not important that we need to have 500 universities in a country. We need some quality. When it comes to the higher education, we need some quality education where research and knowledge production can take place. So I would say that it's time that when where in this very low performing private university needs to think that whether they go with this just a kind of a, I mean, part-time teaching thing, or just to maintain their kind of a educational kind of a showdown rather than an education itself. So it's time that they can come up with a decision. And another point that when it comes to inclusive education, we cannot ensure inclusive education right now in a moment when the pandemic is going on. We see the condition in the village level in particular, where most of the students are having their life struggle rather than, I mean, doing their educational agenda into forward. So that's a bigger challenge that our students are having facing right now. So I was thinking, and furthermore, they don't have those apparatus like I mean, smartphones and all kinds of laptops and pads and all kinds of devices that they needed. So I was just thinking that Bangladesh is a very fertile ground for telecommunication. I mean, it's like the telecom business it has got its fertile land in Bangladesh. We know major the telecom I mean, companies, corporations, they have got their maximum profit from this country. I mean, so it's time that they need to get it back to the citizens. I mean, so the major corporations like Grameen Phones and Robi and others, and government can make a kind of a, and also some of the big corporations, so that they can just they come up with some of the student package or something that can enable the student to go with this online thing. And it is in the possibility, because it's their time to give something back to the society, because they earned much of the profit from this country. So and the last point that I want to mention is, we need to really find some uh, pedagogical innovation, how we make those classrooms, whatever the classroom is, the online classroom, the Zoom classroom, or whatever the form of online classroom is, more I kind of a proactive, more kind of learners based, more kind of go with the philosophy of education, that the learning will go in line with the making and remaking of the self. That when you just to have the access is not the issue, but when it comes to the higher education, we need to also think about the quality. So probably I'll stop here now.
Thank you, Dr. Mazhar, for another round of wonderful discussion. And he actually, Dr. Mazhar brought out a couple of very interesting angles of higher education, which is quality versus quantity, and how students should be coming up with the innovative solutions. So before we again go to the Q&A, let's hear from Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin. And since he teaches in one of the private universities in Bangladesh, and I think it would be interesting to know his part of the experience in Bangladesh delivering education in this pandemic. And we have heard from the two eminent scholars from public universities, so we can juxtapose their experience together and see what could be the way forward in the future. Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin, please unmute your mic.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar. Okay, there's a personal note. Rumapa, I mean Dr. Sadeka Halim, she's a sister figure to us and like my elder sister. So we are connected in a very personal way for quite a long time. And Mr. Izzeddin, good to meet you.
She's our Rumapa too.
Yeah, and Dr. Mazhar is there. Okay, I was listening to you, but I am very unfortunate that I missed the presentation of the first speaker. I needed to hear that. Probably I made a mistake just taking on your time that you prescribed us before. So I have made some sort of mistakes there for sure. Otherwise, I would not be that delayed. Anyway, I caught you up at some point. That's the best part of it. And I was listening very carefully to Izzeddin. Also to Ruma Appa and Mazhar Bhai. So it gave me a good insight just to bridge the gap or to make a relation, make a connection between the Canadian education system and Bangladeshi education system. Although I belong to the private university environment at this moment, I am not really going to focus about that. It's already addressed in different discussions, especially in Dr. Mazhar's discussion. So I am not just adding anything new there. But I need to draw your attention to another aspect of tertiary education, that is vocational institutes. So tertiary education, normally we understand this education that after grade 12, after high school in Canadian context. Now Izzeddin is there and Izzeddin is working with the school division in a Canadian Manitoban school system. Izzeddin, I have Dr. Izzeddin, okay, I have a question to you. Especially this time, I know that Manitoba is a hub for vocational institutes. Many students from all over Canadian provinces and continents come to this place because education is a little bit cheaper here. They don't need to pay that much like in any other areas. And this is why many technical and vocational institutes sprouted in Manitoba, and Manitoba has become very famous in that respect. So in these vocational education systems, students need to learn hands-on techniques and then do it yourself, DIY, right? Do it yourself. We can't really meet their needs using online system or any other systems. They need to be in the class because all these things are very much practical. It's not just lab setting, it's something different, like more automobile. Someone is learning plumbing, other one is just learning something about automobile. Other than that, there are many other technical courses like nursing, care home services, and all other things. I know that they are getting heavily affected. So probably in Canadian context, especially in Manitoba context, we need to focus on that probably there are some needs that are very special and unique. And I don't believe these problems can be attended or addressed through online system. Now we have to think about an alternative. What can we do then? Because problem is there. So one thing I am thinking that probably we can send them CD. We can do something else. We can do outreach programs. We can extend these factories, or not these factories, these workshops to their homes or home settings, if possible, even at miniature level. Like I was thinking, okay, you have a small mini model car, and then it has all parts like a vehicle, big vehicle, and then probably they can do hands-on mechanical learnings at home, at the same time try to refix it, like do it yourself fashion. So this can be one alternative, and I needed to focus on that. In Bangladesh context as well, I believe that's going to be affected severely. And our education system, especially education ministry, Rumapa is here. I know that she can influence our policy very well, especially education policy in Bangladesh context. Probably they would be the worst affected, worst hit in the present pandemic situation. I already spoke to some of them, and they are extremely frustrated that we don't know where we are going. I know some of the vehicle attendants, those people, they just do some sort of vehicle repairing and mechanical assistantship sort of jobs, and they learn it from different not in vocational institutes but in informal settings. Some of them are educated, just they have completed their high school 12th grade and then went to the formal systems, and they're also getting affected during this time. They don't have any hope at this moment. Very concerned about that, all these things. So probably we need to take care of that. The other part is mental health. It is going to be a big challenge, I believe, especially in Manitoban context. In Manitoba or in Canadian context, because many students, they need to socialize. They have that habit, that instinct to become socialized in any way possible. University is the best. Not only university, the post-secondary institutions, they are the best options for them. Okay, these institutions provide them the best environment to become socialized with others. But when they're living at home, many of them are having a mental breakdown, different types of mental problems and psychological problems. In Bangladesh, we live in a very kinship-based familial and social environment, so probably it's not a big problem for us. But in the developed countries, uh, like even in Canada and Manitoba, they are living alone. Most of the young folks are living alone. Some of them are, maybe they have had early marriage and now divorced or separated. During this time, many of them are not connected with family as well. So online connection is something different, but they need someone around them for psychological and emotional supports. All these supports are very important at this moment. Obesity is a big problem, as we know that obesity is a big problem, and then diabetes, especially adolescent diabetes, is a big problem in Canada. When I was working with one health practitioner in Canada as a research associate, I have seen that problem is becoming another big pandemic for Canadian society. And Manitoba was not an exception at that time. I don't know the present situation, but that will happen as well, because physical education, sports is one important part of Canadian lifestyle, even indoor sports. So how these people are now home-based gym is, everyone doesn't have access to gym at home, and many of them can't afford. The problem is everywhere. So these are the problems. I just wanted to focus on these three things. And then the solution part. One solution part probably we need to think is corporate social responsibility. Okay, now this is the high time for these big companies and corporations who have already made huge money, big money over the last decades, okay, through their businesses and trades. So now this is the best time for them to give some back. They are also affected, but they are not that heavily affected. And most of them have that coping mechanism. But now they can contribute in post-secondary education, tertiary education as well. The only thing is that we need to sort out how they might contribute in these sectors, especially the most neglected ones, like the vocational institutes that I was talking about. In vocational institutes, most trainers and instructors are also part-time and temp people. You have to think about that. So their livelihood is going to be shattered if this situation continues for a longer period, especially for 6, 7, 8 months. Many of them will become completely jobless, and we already have their statistics that 200,000 people, temps, especially skilled people, they are not unskilled people, they are skilled people. They were serving about 10,000 different vocational institutes in Canada, and not 200 all from vocational institutes. I have given you a total number in Canada, but probably if we consider certain 15% of them are instructors of these vocational institutes who have been serving these institutes and workshops as temporary or short-term or contractual employees. Do we have any good policy to have them an alternative livelihood in this kind of situation? So these are the most important things, because when they are losing these skills and this practice, probably they will forget at some point. If after 6 or 7 months situation becomes normal and they are invited once again to come back to their workplaces and serve these institutions, they might not be able, because mental stability is a big thing. If there is a big breakdown in their life system and chain, it will affect automatically. Probably they will forget something completely and they will have to learn newly, because these people are grooming themselves every day on the basis of everyday sort of learning, everyday sort of mechanism, and everyday sort of training and giving back and taking back system. So this is one important area that we need to focus. That's everything all from me. And thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to reflect on these areas that most of the time we ignore or we don't take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin, for contributing here. And Helal Mouhiuddin is also part of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada. He is the Director of Research and Communication. So we have formally ended the presentation or the speaking part. Now is the most interesting Q&A session. So let me have the privilege to have the first question for the panelists today. So we have heard a number of times the word quality. And in the second webinar that I hosted last week, the same thing kind of popped up, that whether the current pandemic is forcing to compromise the quality of higher education in our system. Dr. Mazhar used this word a couple of times, Dr. Sadeka Halim as well, and Izzeddin also. So it's an open question. Anyone can jump in. We wanted to know, what is your view on the quality of the education being compromised under this current pandemic situation?
Can I take the floor? Okay, thank you. Actually, this is a very complicated issue, and I have been teaching for almost 3 decades. And Professor Helal, he was in my department. He graduated from the Department of Sociology, and you are also part of family. You graduated from Peace and Conflict Studies. The quality not only depends on how you design the syllabus, the curriculum, it also depends who is actually teaching. I mean, what happens, I can talk in terms of Bangladesh, but not for other universities like universities in Canada, because their quality is not that much compromised. And it has to do a lot with that, how do you recruit teachers, And of course, we try to, recruit using the 73 order in the university, that of course we will go for the most meritorious student, most intelligent, who scored highest, but it is not everything. Like in many private institutions, private universities, they have actually introduced different type of systems for recruiting lecturers, assistant professors. Like they have to give a demonstration and then write an essay or something like that, and then they go through the grade points and others. Even when I was selected by Commonwealth to study in McGill, of course, they have gone through my, my proposal, whether I'm competent enough to, get into McGill University and finish my PhD. I've gone through certain steps. So those are actually not being followed in, or we are not yet in a position to introduce that kind of system in Bangladesh tertiary level education. So when the question of pandemic comes, and when the question of teaching through online comes, of course, we need to question the quality of the teachers as well. They're competent, whether they are competent enough to produce the lecture online. So this is where the training is required. This is where their homework is also required. So I don't know. I mean, the percentage of students who are going, the percentage of the teachers who would be willing to go back to the library or to the e-library and to, venture and to kind of, improve him or herself to give quality education. But the question of squeezing the syllabus over and over came in our webinar today. But I do not agree with that. Because on online, sometimes you can teach better because you have no disruption. You know that these many lectures you have, but when we are offline, we have a lot of meetings and other engagements. You have traffic, horrible traffic in the city. So you don't have to beat any of those barriers. Here you are completely free on your own, having tea. And of course, you can, just teaching, and then you can do it very quietly, and there is no such disruption. So this is where the teacher, I don't think if they are willing, and if they are really, they have commitment, they can, give more better lectures and get more connected. Yes, the connection point is, for us, it is quite challenging. It's not that much challenging for teachers teaching in Canada or other North American universities or in Europe or in Oxford or Cambridge. But being a teacher in Bangladesh and the kind of experience I have, yes, with the internet speed and everything, it would be difficult, Mama, for me to kind of keep the students captivated. Like, okay, you have to be here with me for 40 minutes, and of course they will disappear. They'll just put them, screen off, and I don't know where they are. Only their name would show. So this is also, when we talk about the quality, these are the issues I think we need to take into consideration. Thank you.
I'll just add one point. I mean, just when it comes to quality, and even in the pre-corona time, I mean, when it's offline classroom, what is lacking in our whole of the system is the critical thinking that we have been trying to develop over the years. That this kind of a more memorizing based kind of a protocol that we have been following for a long time, and we have got a term and final exam where they need to write, and I mean, kind of a thing. But those assignment based, I mean, kind of a, I mean, day-to-day kind of a, I mean, kind of experiential learning thing. So we are all we do is mostly summative, but we don't do more of the experiential thing. So I don't know. I mean, this is one of the things that we need to also make sure when we come to that online classroom thing. And another important aspect of online education when it comes to quality is that we need to have that dedicated kind of a repository of a course where people can have an access. Every student and every teacher can have an access. So we also need to have to develop some repository of kind of a lectures or the study material for a particular course, and by that way we can ensure kind of quality.
And thank you very much, Dr. Mazhar. Before Izzeddin and Dr. Helal comes in, let me share a question from the audience. One of the questions, and it is pertaining to quality. And this question is flashed on the screen. I understand Dr. Sadeka Halim already responded, but if you need to elaborate upon, so here's the question for you.
Only one thing I could say is that in most of the public universities, we do not have this mechanism to evaluate the teachers. It's totally absent. So students, they do not have any scope to evaluate that how a teacher is performing in the classroom. In some of the private universities, they do. I don't know how much it is taken into consideration when they get promotions or other facilities and inputs from the authority. But this thing, the time should be introduced. I mean, time has come. If when we would like to modernize, we call ourselves modern, and we are, kind of a middle-income developing country. So these are the mechanisms that need to be introduced so that the students also have opportunity to question the accountability and the transparency of the teachers, and as well as their, they can evaluate their performance. Thank you.
Izzeddin. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I just want to touch up on the quality aspect of the online world. And I think it's just to build on some of the things that had been shared. I think it's important to reflect on our current and previous practices when it comes to recruiting teachers, to enhance our recruiting methods of culturally representative staff, culturally representative material in the classroom, and online learning, where students can see themselves from what they're learning. When teachers are able to bring material that reflects their students' narratives, that reflect their students' stories and reflect their students' backgrounds, students have a higher tendency to engage with the learning phenomenon and to learn more from each other and from their teacher. In the words of Paulo Freire, is to step away from the banking system and to have where you deposit knowledge in the students and they're sitting there learning and capturing all this knowledge, to versus having students participate in the learning process as a part of that learning journey, where students and teachers are engaged with each other and learning from one another. The training aspect of things also now, to think about the pandemic as a chance to re-examine, are we training our staff and our educators to be reflective, to be aware of the diversity of the student body that they have in classrooms? Are we able to look at our systemic barriers now that we have the ability to, and now that we are asked to think outside the box and to think critically? Are we thinking about systemic racism? Are we thinking about systemic oppression? Are we thinking about the legacy of colonialism in our education world? And how does that play a role in our current methodologies when it comes to teaching? And finally, is education accessible to everybody? And if it's not, how could we make that happen? Now, in the Canadian current education system, that education accessibility is an issue when it comes to Indigenous students in Manitoba, students who live on the reserves or cannot be part of the online learning capacity. So how do we make those barriers understood? How do we work on removing them and isolating these barriers so we can engage marginalized groups, marginalized students, and have them teach us about what their challenges are and how we can engage them in the current education system? As an educator, I think of this time as a pause, a reflection of everything that has been done up to this point. And it is important to be able to look at it and say, okay, I'm going to use this time to revamp, to recreate, to learn from past experiences and engage my students to have a meaningful dialogue. So with the Zoom technology, I've learned to use the tools that are available, breakout sessions, the poll features, the whiteboard aspects of things. So all of these technology aspects of things, the technological aspect of things, can be used to engage the students in your lecture and so on and so on. And of course, having the appropriate and sufficient training for students and for teachers on how to use these platforms when it comes to technology is also important. But also engaging families. How do we engage families in their students, in their kids' learning? How do we engage them and hear from them and invite them to be part of this journey is also important. Before the pandemic, it was kind of sometimes hard for families to come in because of the work. You request a meeting, sometimes it takes 2-3 weeks to have someone coming into the school to meet with them. But now, because of the technology aspect, you can make a phone call, you can have a video chat, so parents are much more available to being part of the students' learning and the journeys that their kids are taking on, and which you can use as a teacher and as an education system to enhance this learning and to make it better. So that's what I wanted to touch upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzeddin. I'm just trying to add another dimension here, both in Canada and Bangladesh perspective. In Canada, we do have a number of community colleges, and especially outside Winnipeg, we have areas like Brandon, Thompson, Depa. We have those, smaller community colleges, and I'm not sure what are their strategies to impart long distance online training and how to reach out to their students, because these community colleges offer hands-on training, as Dr. Helal was mentioning, sort of vocational courses and curricula and skill development. So we are just yet to see how the strategy would be adopted by these community colleges. And for Bangladesh perspective, with regards to Dr. Sadeka Halim's comment, and as well as Dr. Mazhar's, I'm also interested to know how the madrasa level education, where a large number of our young population take part in the in and outside Dhaka, they are going to be impacted, and all these measures of social distancing and accessibility that we discussed. So any comments from any panelist on these two aspects is appreciated.
Okay, I need to add something about the quality. It's a very straightforward response to the question that came. Yes, the quality is going down for sure, but I think that happens everywhere all the time. When we adopt a new technology, at the very beginning, we don't remain very conversant in using and applying it efficiently, and that's why this time as well, quality went down. But gradually, we'll find out alternative ways to make it way better than present time, and we would be able to take care of all these glitches, that's for sure. Probably it will not be there at that time. So what kind of problems normally, why quality is going down? Sometime what happens in Bangladesh content, like I am teaching a class online, and suddenly some 4, 5, 6 students got disconnected. They are having a storm or rain or something, internet sort of disruptions. This is one. Another thing is that, okay, we need to be very sensitive about quality, both parties, teachers and the students. So when I'm a teacher, I'm very serious, and I am 100% dedicated in quality maintenance, but the student is not. Probably a student just joined the class and left doing something else, and he'll come back at some point asking a question out of the blue all on a sudden, and which doesn't have any relevance with whatever we have discussed a few minutes ago. Completely something new, because he was not attentive, he was doing something else. I don't know, I don't see how Dr. Sadeka Halim already mentioned that before, that okay, sometimes students, we don't see how they are actually interacting with us. So it's a very one-sided, probably they are just surfing internet or doing Facebooking in the class, and they're not listening to anything. And at the end of the class and course, they're asking for something different, that look, we did not understand this, we did not understand that. And it becomes a very daunting task for the instructors to take them back to the instructions that was given in the class. Again, that okay, we have already addressed all these chapters and all these issues. So there is fundamental problems with online teaching. You cannot really ignore that, and we have to take all these problems into considerations for their better solution. This is one. And another thing, very important one, that is about madrasa education. Yes, and this is another left out area, Dr. Kausar. Thank you very much for bringing that to our focus. And probably we don't know much about that, because we have very compartmentalized thinking I admit our fault and our guilt. It is giving me a sort of guilty feeling that, okay, that happens. We don't really care about them that much because we are in a different system. But we need to be very, attentive to their problems as well. We have to ask them how you are coping up with these problems, pandemic situation when everything is closed. So probably, yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you.
So for the yes, Dr. Yeah.
In terms of the madrasa, I think we have actually experienced a quick expansion, very rapid expansion of madrasas in last 2 decades, and also they have gone through, changes in their curriculum. They have introduced social science, history. They now teach the students to sing the national anthem. Even there's, they also have 25 on, what is the significance of 21st February. That is also being taught. Those were completely not being taught or touched upon. So there are a lot of mindset changing happening there too. But the biggest challenge is that their dormitories have been vacated too. Those children have been sent home, the girls and the boys. So I don't know how they're going to be brought under the umbrella of online education. Not yet we have actually talked about much, but the Prime Minister, when she gave some education stimulus, she also included the madrasa, the institutions, and like that Halim, Aliyah Madrasa, and those are give education on the Fazil degrees, those students and others. She also included them too.
So just to be conscious of time, so we are at the end of this session.
Can I just respond just
yes,
one point that
please.
the Aliyah and Qaumi, recently it's equivalent to Qaumi. The highest Qaumi is equivalent to master's degree in Bangladesh very recently. I mean that's comes under higher education or tertiary education nowadays. I mean it's not, but the Aliyah madrasa that's not probably under this higher. But for the higher education thing, I'm not quite sure what they are doing, but it's important that we also do something about those. I mean that Aliyah, education thing, which is equivalent to master's degree nowadays, which because when somebody has got that self-esteem that he's a master's degree from that Islamic education system or madrasa system, they have got their board, and also in university we have got some departments where different degrees has been provided, including Dhaka universities, where there are some degrees called Urdu and Parsi and Islamic studies and all those kind of degrees where they have got their profession related to some of the religious institution in Bangladesh. So we need to also think about it very seriously, because they also consume a big part of the population. So it's a really serious issue that you have pointed out. Unfortunately, we don't have much to say on that.
No, thank you so much. So I would just go around the floor to have the last words from the panelist, because after the last words, comments from you, we'll formally close the session.
I just want to say thank you, Kausar, for having me to be part of this conversation, and I've learned lots from all of you panelists. So I want to say thank you for that. I also want to remind myself, and everybody else that we are working towards finding better ways always for our students with the new realities of under COVID-19. Our system is adapting, our students are resilient, our staff is doing their best, and we're trying to improve each and every day. There are challenges, but we're working towards solving them and adapting and keep in mind, being mindful of all these challenges and helping our students as we go. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to being part of future conversations as well. Thank you. Shukran.
Is it my turn?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me over, because it gave me an opportunity to participate in a very diverse platform where I could exchange my views with the professors from Canada and US, and as well from the North University in Bangladesh and Mazhar, and youth as well. I think our challenges, of course, they are very critical challenges, and we are passing through a very bad time, a critical time. This pandemic, we don't know when the vaccine is going to come. Could be months, could be years, could be two more years to go. And so we need to kind of learn to sustain with the COVID, and we have to fight back. And as well, we have to keep our elderly safe, our children, and we have to do something for the next generation. Otherwise, they would blame us that we didn't do much. And of course, with that note, of course, I look forward to further dialogue with you. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. Good night.
Good night. Dr. Mazhar? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar, for having me. Actually, technically, I'm kind of part of the co-host, but I did nothing. All credit goes to you.
No.
You organized everything, and it's like it was it's a good opportunity to be with all of you. Just one last point that I want to make is that the question of engagement. When Izzeddin was saying that involving the family, it is important for the the primary and secondary education more and more, but it is also important for the higher education as well. Because if family are not convinced, that this is a good system of education, the online education. The other day, one of my colleagues were having an online class, and one of the parents, father was kind of has got a suspicion about that class to her daughter, that he was got a kind of a long-term phone call with his boyfriend, because somebody, a male teacher, is a lecturer, and he was taking a class, and kind of. So we need to also engage the community, the families, and the society to this adopting with this online culture nowadays. Thank you.
Dr. Helal, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kausaria. I am just adding another comment. It's about the familial engagement, especially how the families and communities would engage. I experienced something very bizarre and very strange. I did not really like that. Many parents, when we are taking classes online, many parents are sitting beside their kids. We don't see them. They were actually watching us, whether we are delivering our lectures properly or not. Or when we realize that, okay, there are other people and uninvited guests and intruders, we feel very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable indeed, because they were not supposed to be there. So we need to educate our parents, our students' parents as well, that, okay, this is not your duty to be here. Everyone, you should have some regards and respect for everyone's privacy and system. So it is happening many times that, okay, they are trying to, probably they are very curious, they want to learn something, but this is not the right platform for them to learn. If they want to learn, they have to seek other avenues, not just from their students' classes. So this is another important thing, that, okay, online, when we are going for online teaching, we cannot control many things, and there are many odd things are happening that we don't really see, but at some point they will become really big problems and challenges. Probably they will just say that, no, it was not fine, the teacher's approach was not good, it should not be like this, because everyone has opinions, and when everyone wants to accumulate their opinions in a collective fashion, it might become a big problem for the academic community, especially for us, and something uncomfortable might appear in the long run, and we need to get rid of that for sure. We need to think about that as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, panelist, for participating quite passionately today. And one disclaimer that I ought to share with you. Today's panel was a co-hosted panel with Dr. Mazhar, but we had some issues in understanding the, and resolving the time zone issues. So I had to force him to join. And of course, I apologize to Dr. Sadeka Halim to also force her to join earlier than expected. So my sincere apologies for that. And Dr. Mazhar is, as I said, he's from IAA, and CRRIC and IAA both co-hosted today's panel, and we shall look forward. Before I just formally conclude this session, I was just tempted to to share with you a couple of very interesting lines from one of the, I would say, often read book on pandemic. It's called The Plague, written by Albert Camus. And I'm reading a translation done by Mr. Stuart Gilbert. And just a couple of lines, bear with me. So Albert Camus was saying about a town, a fictitious town, Oran. And he's saying in one of his initial chapters that, I'm quoting directly from there because of the brevity. So Oran, however, seems to be a town without intimations. In other words, completely modern. Hence, I see no need to dwell on the manner of loving in their town. The men and women consume one another rapidly in what is called the act of love, or else settle down to a mild habit of conjugality. We seldom find a mean between these extremes. That too is not exceptional. At Oran, as elsewhere, for lack of time and thinking, people have to love one another without knowing much about it. What is more exceptional in our town is the difficulty one may experience there in dying. Difficulty? Perhaps is not the right word. Discomfort would come nearer, I unquote. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the day. Wherever you are, stay safe and stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Stay safe and strong. Thank you.
Thank you.